The wind blew softly across the ruined valley, carrying the smell of smoke and metal. The war between humans and Threxians had turned this land into a graveyard. Once the sky here had been blue. Now it was gray with ash. Lieutenant Elias Ward, a human field medic, walked carefully through the rubble. His armor was scratched, his face covered in dust. Around him were the sounds of small fires and the soft crackling of broken machines. He moved from one fallen body to another, checking for signs of life. Any survivors? His comrade, Sergeant Milo, called out from behind a destroyed wall. Elias shook his head. Not yet, but I'll keep looking. The battle had ended only hours ago. Humans had won this sector, but victory did not feel like triumph anymore. It felt like exhaustion. Elias had joined the army to help save lives, not to end them. That was why he became a medic. Even though the front lines were dangerous, he hated the sound of dying soldiers, no matter which side they came from. He climbed over a broken tank, scanning the ground with his helmet light. Then something caught his eye. A faint movement under a pile of rubble. He ran closer and began removing the heavy stones. Beneath them he saw a Threxian soldier still alive. The alien's armor was black and silver, cracked open at the chest. She was breathing, but weakly. Elias froze for a moment. Threxians were powerful, tall beings with glowing amber eyes and skin that looked like polished metal. Most soldiers feared them. This one looked about to die. Her helmet visor was shattered. Elias gently pulled it off, and then he realized something he had never expected. It was a woman. Her features were sharp but elegant. Silver skin shimmered even under dirt and blood. Her hair, more like fine metallic strands, flowed over her shoulder. A commander's insignia glowed faintly on her armor plate. Sergeant Milo appeared beside him. You found one? He raised his rifle. Finish it, Eli. That's a Threxian commander. Elias didn't move. She's still breathing. Exactly. Let her stop. She'd kill you in a second if she could. Elias took a deep breath and opened his medical kit. Not today, Milo frowned. Orders are clear. No medical aid to enemy combatants, Elias didn't answer. His hands were already working, pulling out antiseptic foam, sealing the wound in her chest. He ignored the warning tone from his suit that his oxygen level was dropping. He worked fast, focused, calm. The Threxian woman's eyes opened slowly, glowing like amber fire. She looked at him with hate. Her voice was weak but sharp. Human, why? Elias pressed a patch over her wound and said softly, Because no one deserves to die alone. Not even you. Her hand twitched toward her sidearm, but it was broken. She hissed in pain, glaring at him. Mercy is weakness. Elias smiled faintly. Maybe, but sometimes weakness saves lives. For a moment their eyes met. Two enemies surrounded by death, bound by one small act of kindness. Milo swore under his breath. You're crazy, Ward. Command won't like this. Then they can yell at me later, Elias said. Help me get her to the transport. She's going to make it. They carried her through the smoke toward the medevac zone. Other soldiers stopped and stared. Some muttered curses. Others pointed rifles. A few even laughed in disbelief. Look at that, one soldier said. The medic brought the devil herself. Elias ignored them. He kept walking until he reached the triage tent. He placed her on a bed and hooked her to an oxygen line. The alien groaned softly, her chest rising with shallow breaths. The human nurse on duty looked horrified. You can't bring her here. HQ said, I know what HQ said, Elias cut in. But she's my patient now. The nurse opened her mouth to argue but stopped when she saw his expression. There was no anger, only determination. Elias turned back to the Threxian woman. Her eyes were half open, watching him. What's your name? He asked gently. She hesitated, then whispered, Sailrin. Commander Sailrin, he repeated. I'm Lieutenant Ward, but you can call me Elias. I will call you fool, she said faintly before closing her eyes. Elias chuckled quietly. Fair enough. That night the camp was quiet except for the wind and the hum of the power generators. Elias sat beside her cot, checking her vitals. He had patched her wounds and given her fluids, but her body was still weak from blood loss. He studied her face, wondering what kind of person she was. The Threxians had started the war, or at least that's what the human government claimed. But wars always had two sides, and he had seen enough to know that truth was never simple. He remembered the look in her eyes when she asked why. It wasn't just hatred, it was confusion, maybe even fear. When dawn came, Sailrin opened her eyes again. She tried to move but winced in pain. Elias quickly stopped her. Don't. You'll reopen your wound. She looked around, realizing where she was. This is your camp, she said bitterly. I am your prisoner. You're my patient, Elias corrected softly. Her amber eyes flashed. Do not insult me. I am a commander of the Threxian Vanguard. I have killed hundreds of your kind. And yet, Elias said calmly, you're still alive because one of my kind refused to kill you. She glared at him, but her expression slowly changed. You humans are strange? Good, Elias smiled faintly. It means we're doing something right. Later that morning, a human officer arrived, Colonel Harland, known for his strict discipline. His boots clicked sharply as he entered the tent. Ward, he said, his tone cold. Why is there a Threxian in my medical bay? Elias stood at attention. Sir, she was dying. I couldn't. You disobeyed direct orders, Harland interrupted. We don't treat the enemy. With respect, sir, we treat the wounded. That's my job. The colonel's jaw tightened. He looked at the alien, then back at Elias. You're soft, Lieutenant. Mercy gets people killed. Remember that. He turned to leave, adding, once she's stable, intelligence will interrogate her. Don't get attached. Elias watched him go, then glanced at Sailrin. Her eyes were open, listening. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, she said quietly, your own leader calls you soft. Why defy him? Elias sighed. Because sometimes doing the right thing means standing alone. She studied him, her expression unreadable. You risked your life. For me, why? He shrugged lightly. Because you needed help. That's reason enough. Her eyes softened only slightly, but she turned her head away. You are a fool, Elias Ward, he smiled. Maybe, but I'm your fool now. That night the camp came under light enemy shelling. The sirens blared and soldiers ran to defensive positions. Elias stayed beside his patient, shielding her as dust and shrapnel rattled the tent walls. When it was over, he found her staring at him again. For the first time, there was no anger in her gaze, only curiosity. You could have left, she said slowly. You could have run. Elias met her eyes. And leave you to die again? Not a chance, she frowned slightly. Humans, you confuse me. He laughed softly. You're not the first to say that. Hours later, as the fires died down and the stars appeared above the dark sky, Elias sat outside the tent for a moment. He looked at the stars, some of them home to human colonies, others to Threxian worlds. He wondered how it had all gone so wrong. War had made monsters of both sides. But maybe he thought peace could start the same way war did, with just one small act. One human helping one alien. When he went back inside, Sailrin was asleep, her breathing steady. He adjusted the blanket around her shoulders and smiled faintly. Rest easy, Commander, he whispered. You're safe now. She didn't hear him, but her expression softened in her sleep. Outside, the night wind carried away the last sound of gunfire. For the first time in years, Elias felt that maybe there was still hope, even in a galaxy filled with war. The morning sun rose weakly over the camp, coloring the sky pale gold. Human soldiers were busy repairing defenses and cleaning up after last night's shelling. Drones hummed above, scanning the area for hidden enemies. Inside the medical tent, Commander Sailrin slowly opened her eyes. The air smelled strange, clean but sharp, filled with the scent of human antiseptics. Her chest still hurt where the wound had been sealed, but the pain was dull now. She turned her head and saw Elias Ward sitting nearby, reading from a small tablet. His armor jacket was open, his hands bandaged from hours of work. When he noticed her awake, he smiled softly. You're awake, he said, voice gentle. How do you feel? Sailrin blinked slowly, her amber eyes narrowing. I feel trapped. Elias nodded, understanding. You're in a human medical camp. You were badly injured. I patched you up. I remember, she muttered. You disobeyed your leader. He gave a small shrug. He can yell at me later. Right now you need to heal. She studied him carefully, unsure what to make of him. The humans she'd fought were cold and brutal, but this one seemed different, too calm, too kind. Why, she asked again, her voice low. Why save me? Because you were dying, Elias said simply. And I'm a medic. That's what I do. Sailrin frowned. We killed thousands of your kind. You should hate me. Elias's gaze didn't waver. Maybe I should. But hate won't build anything better. For a long time she was silent. His words felt strange to her, soft but heavy. like something she couldn't shake off. 2 soldiers entered the tent carrying food trays. They set one down near her and gave Elias a wary look. "You sure it's smart feeding her?" one muttered. "She's a Threxian commander. Might bite." Elias ignored the comment. "Go on. I'll handle her." When they left, he placed the tray beside her. The food looked simple: protein paste, fruit, water. Sarge stared at it without touching. "You think I will eat your human slop?" Elias smiled faintly. "I'd call it nutrition paste. But yes, I think you should. Your body needs it." "I eat only live nutrient gel," she said proudly. "Not this." "Well," Elias said, sitting down, "our menu's limited. No glowing alien gel today." She crossed her arms. "Then I will not eat," Elias sighed. "You sound like half my patients." He leaned back in his chair. "Suit yourself. But if you pass out again, I'll just have to save you again." She glared at him, but he didn't flinch. After a long silence, she finally picked up the spoon. When she tasted it, her face twisted in disgust. "Awful," Elias chuckled. "You'll get used to it." She swallowed reluctantly, glaring at him the whole time, and somehow that small, quiet moment broke a little of the wall between them. Later that day, Elias brought his medical tools to check her wound. She tensed as he approached. "Relax," he said softly. "Just changing your bandages." "Do not touch me," she warned. "You are not of my kind." He paused, then smiled gently. "You're right, but I can still help." When he carefully lifted the medical patch, she flinched at first, but his touch was steady, professional, respectful. No one in her army would ever treat a human with care. No one would show kindness to an enemy. Yet this man did, without asking for anything in return. When he finished, he said quietly, "Your healing rate is faster than expected. Your body's strong." Sarge looked away. "Threxians are born warriors. Our bodies are built for battle." Elias nodded. "Then you'll be walking again soon." She blinked in surprise. "You plan to let me walk around?" "I am your prisoner." "Maybe," he said. "But prisoners can still heal in sunlight. It helps the mind, too." That night, as the twin moons rose over the camp, Elias stood outside the tent and watched the stars. The war had taken everything from so many people, families, homes, even hope. But here, under the same sky, he wondered if peace could ever be possible. Inside, Sarge listened to the quiet voices of humans talking near the campfires. Their laughter sounded strange to her ears, so light, so unguarded. Her people never laughed like that. She touched the bandage on her chest and whispered to herself, "Strange humans." Days passed. Sarge began to regain her strength. She could sit up and even stand with help. Elias often came by, bringing her books translated into Threxian language. "Helps pass the time," he said. She looked suspicious at first. "Human stories?" He nodded. "Some are war stories. Some are about hope." "One is about a man who forgave the army that destroyed his home." She raised an eyebrow. "That man was a fool," Elias smiled. "Maybe, but his forgiveness changed everything." She said nothing, but later, when he left, she found herself reading a few pages. The words were simple but powerful, about courage, loss, and finding meaning in pain. When Elias returned, he noticed the book was half read. "Good story?" he asked with a teasing smile. She looked away quickly. "It is acceptable," he grinned. "I'll take that as a yes." A week later, a new problem arrived. A group of human intelligence officers came to the camp. They had heard that a high-ranking Threxian commander was being treated here and wanted to question her. Elias met them outside the tent. "She's not ready," he said firmly. "She's still recovering," one officer sneered. "You don't decide that, Lieutenant. HQ wants information." Elias stood tall. "Then HQ can wait." "You'll not torture a patient under my care." The officer stepped closer. "You're protecting the enemy." "That's treason." "Call it what you want," Elias replied calmly. "But I'm not letting you harm her." The officer glared at him, then finally backed off. "You'll regret this," he muttered before walking away. When Elias went back inside, Sarge was sitting up watching him. "You argued for me." "Of course," he said. "They had no right." She looked confused. "You risked your position, Your Honor." "For me? A warrior of your enemy?" Elias smiled softly. "You're my patient. That's enough reason." For a long time she said nothing. Then in a quiet voice she whispered, "Your kind fights with strange weapons." Elias tilted his head. "Like what?" She met his eyes. Kindness. That night, a small storm rolled over the camp. Rain pattered against the tents and thunder echoed through the valley. Elias sat inside checking supplies while Sailrin watched the raindrops slide down the plastic walls. "Your world is noisy," she said suddenly. Elias chuckled. "We call it weather. Does your planet have rain?" She nodded slowly. "We have crystal storms. The sky rains shards of light that sing when they hit the ground." He smiled. "That sounds beautiful." She hesitated, then said quietly, "It was." Her voice carried sadness, a memory of home, of something lost in the endless war. Elias didn't ask further. He just listened. Sometimes silence was better than questions. After a while, she spoke again. "When I fought your kind, I believed humans were soulless beasts. But you—" She stopped, searching for words. "You are not what I expected." Elias met her gaze. "And what did you expect?" She thought for a moment. "A monster," he smiled sadly. "I've seen monsters too, Sailrin. But none of them were born that way. War made them." For the first time, she nodded slowly. "Perhaps it made us all monsters." Elias looked at her, his voice soft. "Then maybe we can learn to be something else." Their eyes met again. The air between them felt heavy but calm. Outside, the rain fell harder, washing away the dust and blood from the battlefield beyond the camp. Days later, Sailrin took her first steps outside the medical tent. The soldiers nearby stopped and stared. Some whispered. Others frowned. A few aimed their rifles until Elias waved them down. "Easy," he told them. "She's under my supervision." Sailrin stood tall even in weakness. The sunlight reflected off her silver skin, and for a moment she looked like a living statue from another world. Elias walked beside her. "See, fresh air helps." She looked around at the humans working, laughing, eating. "You live like this, even during war?" "We try," Elias said. "Life has to go on." She turned her face toward the sky. "Strange creatures, humans. You smile when everything burns." He smiled softly. "That's how we survive." When she looked back at him, her expression had changed. There was still pride, still distance, but also something else. Respect, maybe. Or curiosity. That evening, she sat outside the tent watching the sunset. Elias joined her with 2 cups of warm tea. "I read about your people once," he said. "The Threxians were explorers before they became warriors, right?" She nodded slowly. "Long ago. We traveled the stars seeking knowledge. But power became our truth. We forgot who we were." Elias handed her the cup. "Then maybe this is a good place to remember." She held the cup, studying the steam rising from it. Perhaps, for the first time, a faint, almost invisible smile touched her lips. It was small, uncertain, but it was there. Elias saw it and felt a quiet warmth in his chest. Neither of them spoke after that. They just sat together, 2 soldiers from opposite worlds, watching the sun sink behind the hills. The war still raged beyond the horizon. But here, in this small corner of peace, something fragile and new had begun to grow. The night sky over the human camp was black, pierced by the soft glow of distant stars. The air smelled of damp earth and smoke from lingering fires. The camp was quiet, too quiet. Lieutenant Elias Ward walked past rows of tents, checking the perimeter for signs of trouble. Beside him, Commander Sailrin moved slowly but steadily. Her wounds had mostly healed, but the bruises and small scars remained, and she moved cautiously. "You've grown stronger," Elias said, his voice soft. "Soon you won't need my support." Sailrin glanced at him, amber eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "Do you doubt I could fight alone?" she asked, voice sharp. "Not at all," Elias said calmly. "I just don't want you to fall before the war is truly over." She said nothing, but the small smile she gave him betrayed a hint of appreciation. The quiet shattered suddenly. A series of explosions shook the ground, sending dirt and debris into the air. Warning sirens blared across the camp. Human soldiers scrambled, shouting orders and grabbing weapons. "Attack!" someone yelled. "Rogue Threxian units! They found us!" Sailrin froze, then looked at Elias. "Your enemy." Again he grabbed her arm. "Stay close. Follow me." The camp erupted into chaos. Explosions lit up the night, throwing shadows across tents and barricades. Soldiers returned fire as alarms blared, their blaster beams cutting through the smoke. The rogue Threxians were fast and precise, clearly veterans, trained killers seeking something or someone. Elias guided Storym toward a safer section of the camp, ducking under falling debris. A tent collapsed nearby, sending clouds of dirt into their faces. "Move," Elias shouted, pulling her along. She stumbled slightly but caught herself. "You risked yourself before to save me," she yelled over the explosions. "Why are you here again?" "Because," he said firmly, "you're not going to die in my hands tonight." Her amber eyes softened slightly at his words, but there was no time to dwell on it. They reached the medical tent, only to see two rogue Threxian soldiers tearing through supplies. Elias fired a few warning shots, forcing them to retreat temporarily. Storym's voice was sharp. "They are here for me." "I am not just any soldier," Elias nodded. "I know, but you will not face them alone." As they prepared for the next wave of attackers, Elias noticed something disturbing. The rogue soldiers weren't here to rescue her. They were here to execute her, punish her for surviving among humans. She froze. "They want me dead," she said quietly, voice tight with anger and fear. "Because I lived." Elias put a hand on her shoulder. "Then we make sure they don't succeed." The next minutes were a blur. Elias and Storym moved through the chaos like a single unit. She fought alongside him, but carefully, using precise strikes to disarm without lethal force. Despite her skill, the rogue soldiers were relentless. A blaster bolt tore through a nearby barricade, sending debris flying. Elias dove in front of her, taking the brunt of the blast on his shoulder. Pain shot through him, but he gritted his teeth and kept moving. Storym's eyes widened in shock. "You could have been killed." He grinned through the blood and dust. "Not today," she wanted to argue, but there was no time. The attackers regrouped, forcing them back toward the central area of the camp. Finally, the last of the rogue soldiers was cornered near the edge of the camp. Elias kept them at bay with his blaster while Storym stood tall, facing the remaining threats. Then a shadow moved behind them. Elias turned, catching movement in the darkness. More figures emerged, Threxian officers loyal to her old command. "Storym," one shouted. "You are a traitor. Surrender now." She stiffened, realizing the truth. These were her own people come to bring her back, or finish her for betraying the Threxian cause. Elias tightened his grip on her arm. "They won't hesitate," he warned. "You need to trust me." Her amber eyes met his. For the first time, the fury and pride in her expression were mixed with doubt and fear. She had faced countless enemies before, but never the ones who should have protected her, turning against her for surviving. The rogue Threxians and her own officers were closing in. Storym's usual confidence wavered. For a moment she seemed frozen in place, unable to act. Elias stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Storym, look at me," she did. "You are strong. You've survived when others would have fallen. You are not a traitor, you are alive. And right now that is what matters." She blinked, trying to gather her thoughts. "Alive, yes. But at what cost? I will be hunted no matter what I do." Elias looked at her calmly. "Then we survived together." Her chest heaved as she struggled to take in his words. "You humans, you risk everything for one enemy." He leaned slightly closer, voice low and steady. "Because one enemy can teach us more about life than 1,000 battles." She opened her mouth, about to reply, but a loud explosion from the central tents forced them both to duck. The night was a storm of fire and smoke. When the dust settled, they found themselves in a small clearing at the edge of the camp. Storym's hands were trembling, not from fear of death, but from the realization that her own people had turned on her. Elias knelt beside her, brushing dirt from her cheek. "You're okay," he said softly. "I've got you." Her eyes, wide and filled with a mix of awe and vulnerability, met his. The chaos around them faded for a brief moment. "You saved me again," she whispered. Elias smiled faintly. "Of course. I told you before, you're not going to die in my hands." Then he leaned even closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You're beautiful." For a moment, everything froze. The distant sounds of battle, the screams, the blaster fire, all faded away. Storym stopped moving. Her amber eyes widened, focusing solely on him. She had heard many words in her life, orders, insults, war cries, even praise, but never this. Never had anyone told her she was beautiful. The words struck her deeper than any weapon ever could. For the first time, the fierce Threxian commander felt a strange warmth in her chest, a trembling in her heart that she could not name. Her lips parted slightly. No words came. She was caught between disbelief, anger, and something she had never felt before. A quiet trust. Elias held her gaze. "You're alive, Selryn, and more than that. You matter." A loud crash brought them back to reality. More Threxian soldiers were approaching. Elias grabbed her hand. "We move now. Together." She nodded, her pride still burning but her fear replaced by a new determination. She had been stopped, not by their weapons but by his simple words. And somehow that made her stronger. They ran toward the northern ridge, moving through ruined terrain and burning debris. Side by side, human and Threxian, they became a single unit. Selryn's movements were precise and deadly but controlled. She no longer hesitated or faltered. The whispered words of Elias gave her courage she had never expected. Every step forward reminded her of the moment she stopped, when a human had seen her as more than a soldier, more than a weapon. By dawn, they reached a safe position on a cliff overlooking the valley. The fires of the camp below burned bright against the darkness. The human soldiers were regrouping and the rogue Threxians had been pushed back, at least for now. Selryn leaned against a rock, breathing heavily. She looked at Elias with a mixture of exhaustion and something new, gratitude, maybe even admiration. Your words, they changed me," she admitted quietly, her voice almost breaking. Elias smiled softly, tired but steady. "I didn't change you. I just reminded you of who you are, alive, strong, and yes, beautiful." She stared at him, her mind struggling to process the emotions he had awakened in her. Pride, anger, fear, and now something like trust, something that had no name. For the first time, Selryn saw humans in a new light. Not just as enemies, not just as fragile creatures of flesh and bone, but as beings capable of courage, mercy, and understanding. And for the first time, she wondered if she could see herself through their eyes, too. The sun rose over the valley, casting light on the scars of battle and the survivors who now looked toward a future that might not be so hopeless. Elias offered her a hand. "Come on," he said. "We have a long way to go." She took it, and for the first time she didn't hesitate. Together, human and alien, they moved forward, toward safety, toward understanding, and toward something neither of them could have imagined when the war began. The morning sun stretched its pale light across the cliff where Elias Ward and Commander Selryn had taken refuge. The valley below was scarred by the battle, smoke curling into the sky like thin gray fingers. Human soldiers moved cautiously, securing the area. Selryn stood beside Elias, her silver armor scratched but gleaming faintly in the sunlight. She had regained most of her strength, yet her expression was tense. The rogue Threxians had retreated for now, but she knew they would return, and so would her high command. "You've changed," she said quietly, breaking the silence. Elias glanced at her, curious. "Me? Yes. You care for people who should be your enemies. You risk your life for them. You care for me." Her voice was quiet, almost vulnerable. "I do not understand humans," he shrugged. "We're strange, yes. But sometimes strange is the only way to survive a galaxy filled with war." She looked down, frowning. "You are foolish." "And you think I'm brave," he said with a small grin. Selryn didn't answer immediately. Instead, she watched the distant smoke rise over the ruined city below. She had seen human bravery before in battle, but never this kind of courage, the courage to save an enemy, the courage to stand alone against one's own command. A sudden drone whirred overhead, catching her attention. Elias followed her gaze. "They're observing us," he said. "Not just humans. Threxians, too. Your people won't forgive what happened." Selryn's amber eyes narrowed. "They will come, and they will demand I return. Or die." "You won't go with them," Elias said firmly. "Not while I'm here." She turned to him, eyes flashing. "You do not understand. I am a commander of the Threxian vanguard. Loyalty is everything. My people, my family, they will punish me for being here." "I understand more than you think," Elias said gently. "Loyalty can be twisted. Sometimes it blinds you to what is right." She looked away, unsure how to respond. She had lived by loyalty, by duty her entire life, and yet every time she thought of Elias, of his hands, steady and gentle, of his words, She felt something stir within her that had nothing to do with orders or battle. Hours passed. Sarge sat quietly observing humans tending the wounded, sharing food, laughing softly despite the destruction around them. Elias came to her with a small pack of supplies. "You need to eat," he said, handing her a tray of protein paste. She looked at it skeptical. "I eat nothing that smells of humans." He smiled faintly. "Then think of it as fuel for your strength." She hesitated, then ate slowly. Elias watched her, saying nothing. In the silence, a bond began to grow, not spoken of but felt. Each small act of care, each quiet moment built a fragile trust between them. It was a trust she had never known in her life of war. And it scared her. That night, a human officer approached Elias's post. "Lieutenant Ward," Colonel Harlan said, his voice cold and formal. "What is the status of the Threxian commander?" "She is recovering," Elias said firmly. "She is not to be harmed or interrogated at this time." The colonel's face hardened. "Orders are clear. Return her to HQ. Your feelings for her do not matter." "My feelings?" Elias asked, calm but firm. "This is not about feelings. This is about right and wrong." "She is a patient." Harlan's eyes narrowed. "You are risking everything for an enemy. You know what will happen if you continue this way." Elias did know, but he also knew that letting fear and blind obedience dictate actions was worse than any punishment he could face. "Then I accept the risk," he said simply. Meanwhile, Sarge watched from the shadows of her tent. She had been listening. She understood the danger they both faced. Her high command would never forgive her for trusting a human. Her people would see her survival as betrayal, and yet she could not deny what she felt. Elias had saved her, again and again. He had seen her not as a weapon, not as an enemy, but as a being worthy of care and respect. She clenched her fists. She had always been taught that mercy was weakness. But now she wondered, could it be strength? She remembered his words from the cliff, whispered softly, "You're beautiful." The memory struck her in a way she could not explain. Pride, confusion, anger, and something tender and unfamiliar swirled together in her chest. She had been trained to hide all emotions behind a mask of steel. Yet with him, she had felt alive. The following day, scouts reported Threxian reinforcements approaching. Elias gathered his team. "They want to capture her," he said, "or worse. We can't let that happen." Sarge stood beside him, her expression hard. "I will fight with you. Not because of loyalty to humans, but because you have protected me when none of my own could." Elias looked at her in surprise. "You don't owe me anything." Her amber eyes met his. "Perhaps, but I owe myself." Together they prepared to move. Supplies packed, weapons ready, hearts steady. They would face the storm together. As they moved through the ruins, Sarge kept close to Elias. Every so often, she glanced at him, silently measuring trust. She had never needed anyone. She had never asked for help, yet here she was, following a human, learning to rely on him. The first wave of enemy scouts arrived unexpectedly. Sarge reacted instinctively, disarming one soldier with a precise strike, then blocking another with Elias's guidance. Their movements were synchronized, almost like a dance, an unspoken understanding growing between them. When the scouts were defeated, Sarge's chest heaved with effort. Elias wiped blood from her cheek. "You did well," he said softly. She flinched slightly at the touch but did not pull away. Her amber eyes softened just a fraction. "I fight. As I must," she said. He nodded. "Yes, but sometimes fighting isn't enough. Sometimes living is the strongest fight of all." Hours later, they found shelter in the ruins of a collapsed building. Elias tended to small cuts and scrapes while Sarge rested, exhausted from the day's exertion. "You are relentless," she said quietly, watching him move. "I thought humans were fragile. Yet you persist," he smiled faintly. "We are fragile, but sometimes fragility is the reason we keep going. Every life is worth it, even yours." She looked at him, feeling her walls crumble. For decades, she had relied only on her strength, on her pride, on her warriors. And now, a human had shown her something she had never imagined. Compassion without expectation. Her voice trembled slightly. "You'd have changed my view of your kind. But my people, they will never forgive this." Elias reached out, brushing dirt from her cheek. "Then we faced that together." She flinched, her heart racing. But she didn't move away. The words, the touch, the trust, It all stirred something inside her she could not name. The next day brought the hardest test. Threxian reinforcements arrived in full force, demanding her return. She was cornered, not by humans, but by the ones she had once called family. Elias stepped in front of her, hands raised. "You will not take her," he said firmly. Sailrin's amber eyes darted between him and her high command. Every instinct told her to obey, to surrender. Every lesson drilled into her since birth screamed that loyalty was everything. But then she remembered his words, whispered that night on the cliff. "You're beautiful. You matter." She realized that survival, trust, and even love were choices she could make, not dictated by duty, not by fear, but by her own heart. She made her choice. "I go with no one," she declared, her voice strong, echoing across the ruins. "I choose life. I choose this human. I choose what I believe is right." The Threxian officers hesitated. This was unprecedented. Their commander, Sailrin, refused orders. She had chosen a human. Elias took her hand, feeling her fingers tighten around his. "Then we leave," he said softly. Together they slipped through the shadows of the ruins, leaving the reinforcements behind. Every step was dangerous, every moment uncertain, but they moved as one, bound by trust and the fragile beginnings of something more. As they reached the edge of the valley, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the broken landscape. Sailrin glanced at Elias, a mixture of pride, gratitude, and something undefinable in her amber eyes. "You saved me," she said quietly. He shook his head. "No, you saved yourself. I just helped." She considered his words. For the first time, she realized that strength was not measured only by weapons or victories, but by the courage to choose life, to trust, and to grow beyond what the world demanded of you. Her gaze returned to the horizon. The war was not over. Battles would come, dangers would strike, and enemies would hunt them. But now, for the first time, she felt a bond stronger than fear, stronger than orders, stronger than hate. She looked at Elias again, and for the first time in her life, she felt hope. The valley lay silent as dawn broke, painting the scarred landscape in pale orange light. Smoke still drifted from the remnants of the last battles, but for the first time in days, there was a fragile calm. Elias Ward and Commander Sailrin stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking the ruins. Below, human soldiers were regrouping, repairing defenses, and sharing whispered conversations about the bravery of the Threxian commander who had chosen to stand with them. Sailrin adjusted her armor, now patched and polished after days of recovery and battle. Her amber eyes were sharp, but there was a softness in them, a vulnerability she had never allowed herself before. "You realize your actions will change how both sides see you," Elias said gently. She looked at him, expression unreadable. "I do, but I also realize I have seen something humans can offer, something my people never taught me." Elias tilted his head. "And what is that?" "Trust, mercy, life beyond orders," she said softly. "And their hope." Their respite was short. Scouts reported a large Threxian fleet approaching, a punitive strike meant to reclaim Sailrin or destroy the human camp. Elias turned to her. "We have one chance to prevent bloodshed. To stop war before it starts." Her gaze sharpened. "We fight?" "Not with weapons," he said firmly. "We fight with proof. Proof that we can coexist. That loyalty and trust are stronger than fear." Sailrin's brow furrowed. "You ask me to defy my people." "Publicly?" "I ask you to choose life," Elias said. "For yourself. And for them." Her amber eyes softened, remembering the first time he had whispered the words that had shaken her to the core. "You're beautiful." Those words had made her pause, made her question everything she had been taught about war. "Loyalty and strength, yes," she said quietly. "I will try." They prepared together. Sailrin donned ceremonial armor, not for battle, but to show her people she still commanded dignity. Elias stood beside her, human armor scratched and worn, but his stance calm and strong. When the Threxian fleet appeared on the horizon, massive warships cutting across the sky like predatory birds, Sailrin spoke through a translator, her voice carrying across comms. "This is Commander Sailrin of the Vanguard. I speak as a witness. I choose life over orders. I stand with humans. I ask you to do the same." There was silence on the comms, only the hum of the fleet engines. Then a single voice crackled. "Traitor, you will pay for this." Sailrin held her ground. "No, I pay by standing for what is right, not by killing innocents, not by blind obedience. Choose peace or continue the cycle of destruction you call duty. Elias watched her, his heart steady but tense. Her courage was unlike anything he had seen. Not because of skill with weapons, but because of the risk of defying an entire empire. She turned toward him. Your kind whispers words that change hearts. Mine shouts orders that break them. Which is stronger? He smiled faintly. I think we're about to find out. The flagship above them hovered silently, massive and imposing. A single pod descended carrying a high-ranking Threxian officer, Sail Rin's former mentor. Sail Rin, the officer said sharply as they approached. You betray your blood, your honor, your entire fleet. Sail Rin stood taller. I betray nothing. I choose life. I choose peace. I stand with those willing to see beyond hate. The officer's amber eyes flickered with anger. You will regret this, perhaps, she admitted. But I will not regret choosing what is right. Tension rippled across the fleet. Humans armed and ready watched the sky, waiting. Yet there was a strange calm between Elias and Sail Rin. They had faced death together, chaos together, and for the first time they were not afraid. Elias stepped forward. This ends now. Let us talk, not fight. Look at what has been destroyed. Look at the cost of war. The officer's expression wavered. Sail Rin's words had weight, yes, but Elias's calm human voice added something new. Something unexpected. Why do you fight for her? The officer demanded. Elias looked at Sail Rin, then back at the officer. Because she matters. And because we all matter. Life is stronger than orders. Mercy is stronger than hate. And this galaxy needs proof that it can be better. Sail Rin's hand brushed his. Amber eyes met his, full of trust, gratitude, and something deeper. A connection forged in battle and compassion. The Threxian officer hesitated. It had been centuries since one of their commanders defied the fleet so openly, choosing peace over war. And yet the sight of humans saving Threxians, of a human whispering words that made a warrior stop, pause, and trust. It was undeniable. After a tense moment, the officer spoke. Perhaps there is merit in this. Perhaps we have been blind. Sail Rin nodded slowly. Then see what can be done. Stop the cycle of vengeance. Let life be stronger than orders. A ripple of whispers spread through the fleet. Ships wavered, weapons powered down, and for the first time in centuries, two civilizations hesitated instead of firing. Elias exhaled softly, relief washing over him. You did it, he said quietly. Sail Rin's lips curved in a small smile. We did it, together. He looked at her, eyes gentle. You know, I meant what I said, from the first time I whispered it. She studied him, her amber eyes glowing softly in the morning sun. And what was that? You're beautiful, he said again, softly but firmly. Not because of your strength, not because of your power, but because of this. The courage to choose life, to trust, to be yourself. For a moment, Sail Rin felt her breath catch. The words had been said before in fear and chaos, but now, with the war paused, with the galaxy watching, they touched her heart in a way nothing else ever could. Her lips parted slightly. You see me? I see all of you, he said simply. And I respect it. All of it. The Threxian officer nodded slowly. You are changed, Sail Rin, and perhaps this is the bridge our worlds need. Sail Rin looked at Elias. Her trust in him and humans and something beyond hate had grown stronger than fear or loyalty to a fallen empire. She realized that life and connection were more powerful than any weapon. She turned to the officer. We will not forget duty, but we will honor life first. Let this war end not with blood, but with proof that two peoples can stand together. The officer hesitated, then gave a sharp nod. Orders were relayed. Weapons were lowered. Communication channels opened. Below, human soldiers began to cheer quietly, watching the sky clear as the Threxian fleet paused in recognition of this new path. As the dust settled and the first human reinforcements arrived to help stabilize the valley, Elias and Sail Rin stood side by side. Neither spoke at first, but their hands brushed, a silent, intimate acknowledgement of the bond that had grown between them. Sail Rin finally spoke, voice soft. You whispered words that made me stop. That made me think. Made me choose. Elias smiled gently. Sometimes one simple truth is stronger than 1,000 orders. She looked at him, amber eyes shimmering with emotion. Then I choose you. And I choose hope, and Trust you. He reached out, holding her hand fully this time. And I choose you, Sail Rin. Not because you are a warrior or a commander, but because you are you. The sun rose higher, casting a warm glow over the valley. The battle-scarred land was still full of ruins, but for the first time, it was also full of possibility. Humans and Threxians alike looked to the horizon, seeing not an enemy but a chance to rebuild, to heal, to trust, and in that quiet moment, two beings from opposite worlds, human and alien, stood together, hands entwined, hearts aligned, witnessing the beginning of a new era. The galaxy was still vast. The war was not completely over. But in that valley on that cliff, hope had won first, whispered gently by the courage of one human and the awakening heart of one alien. And for Sail Rin, that simple word, beautiful, would never be forgotten.